We didn't know who had veto power. We didn't know who should be making the decisions anymore. And I think because truly we didn't know. We were in this almost fear-based decision making.
You're very energetic and boisterous, and I'm a little bit more reserved and quiet in most circumstances, yet we're still both kind of type A, get it done personalities. We're both going to pick up whatever ball needs to be picked up and run with it. And so we found a lot of times we were both trying to pick up the same ball, and we had different opinions on how that should happen. It became a sticking point in our relationship. It was something that was actually impacting our relationship completely. All right, welcome to Thrive After Dark, episode 2, everybody. I just want to thank you for all the questions and interest that you've thrown our way after the first one. We're excited about this, and we're extremely glad to see that you are too.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about all things working relationship. Justin's obviously my husband, I'm his wife, and all of the challenges that come through working together for as long as we have, and then how to overcome it by keeping the passion alive.
All right, let's get into it. Okay, so for those that don't know, we actually own a business together, right? Husband and wife. So let's talk a little bit about how that all started and how we eventually got here and all the challenges that we met along the way.
Yeah, so we built a real estate company together, and truly was not the plan. No. We started off as simply I was a realtor hustling. We were pregnant and you needed to get licensed. And that was going to allow us to keep my pipeline intact and serve my clients and family and friends without missing a beat. And then you found out that your effort met your income in this industry, and you kind of had that, remember that mind-blowing moment looking at our bank account, like, who do we owe this money to?
So you mentioned that I got licensed while you were pregnant, and that only was a matter of necessity. We were struggling hardcore. Financially, it was tough because you had stepped away from General Motors to bet on yourself in this real estate. I was still a police officer. And of course, with you being pregnant, eventually there's an end outcome to that. And you can't be out there showing homes 9 months pregnant. It doesn't work for anybody. And so the idea was, well, I'll just get licensed and I'll fill that gap in the meantime, and fell in love with it, and the rest is history.
Yes.
And it wasn't until we eventually got farther down the road, I think we were about 2 years into that dual career where I was a police officer and doing real estate, that we finally had what I would consider our breakthrough month. We had the opportunity to actually sell a prominent politician's family home. Yep. We actually double dipped it. You represented the seller, I represented the buyer, and then we had another double dip transaction, same fashion, that hit that month. And we took, I think, the first vacation that we had taken in probably about 3 or 4 years. And it was on that vacation that I looked at our bank account in complete disbelief, because we had made as much money that 1 month that I did in an entire year as a police officer in Detroit. And it was at that point that our wheels got spinning of, hey, we need to get this time back and start focusing solely on this real estate thing.
Yeah. And speaking of details, I remember the conversation that changed everything, because you were still full-time police officer, right, and you were clearly full-time real estate. I remember those days like it was yesterday. Sometimes you didn't know what uniform you should be in. You would grab tickets, because I'd have them prepared for you to go show property, and you were still in your full-on cop uniform. I'm like, wrong uniform, you have to change. And I remember my dad took you out for breakfast. And this was in the same breath that he's like, by the way,
not watching
you guys are pregnant again, and we're done. We're not going to watch your kids anymore, which we totally understand. My parents are absolute angels. They helped raise many grandchildren before
we wouldn't be here without them,
before
honestly.
They should have. Yeah. So we get it. We were on our third child, and they were ready to be retired. All is fair. And my dad said to you, hey, and by the way, what would happen if you took that full time that you give to DPD, 40, 50 hours at the time, and you put all of that into real estate? Could you serve your family at a higher level?
Yeah, could I replace my income? And it was a no-brainer.
Yep.
I don't know why I didn't look at it that way, but it was definitely a light bulb moment that just had me say, yeah, you're right. And I think it was right around then that I went ahead and put my retirement papers in. And June 3rd of 2015 was no longer a police officer and now was a full-time realtor.
Yep. Yeah. And none of this was easy. We were broke for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we did what a lot of realtors do when they start to become successful and they're able to serve more and more people because their skills are growing. We weren't great at saving money. We weren't great at keeping our money. We were trying to build a team then and hire employees. And it just wasn't really working in our favor. That one great month turned into several more months of just pain. Just a lot of pain, a lot of work, a ton of hours, 7 days a week. I know when I went back at it, which was really quickly after having all of my children, there was no such thing as maternity leave for me.
No.
It was one of those moments where you realize, like, okay, we're just doing whatever it takes. We had babies on hips. We were taking kids to showings. We were taking them to closings. Like, we were doing whatever it took. And we then had to hire help. We needed an admin. We needed a person at home to help us with our children in moments where it just wasn't appropriate to bring the kids to work anymore. And so our money was going there. And it took us years to finally get to the point where we were like, okay, we're ready to bring on agents. We have a lot to offer. And we had the Woodbeck team, which was a sales team with a franchise in town under Keller Williams for several years. And we grew fairly large there. I ended up running the KWs for a minute.
We followed their model, right?
We did.
Which is the team building model. That's where teams really kind of exploded in our industry in the last 15 years or so, was under Keller Williams. And the model there is a headcount model. And so we started that process, started hiring, saw some turnovers, learned a lot of tough lessons. At no point, the thing that I think that's admirable is at no point during any of this growth and all the challenges that we faced in those years that we were extremely stretched financially, we never stopped to feel sorry for ourselves. We just simply did the work. I don't recall there ever being a time where either one of us ever doubted what we were doing or ever said, I just don't want to do it anymore. We just simply did it because it needed to be done and we knew which direction we were headed.
Yeah, and quite frankly, we were good at it. We were just really good at helping people buy, sell, and invest in real estate. And we loved it. We loved what we were doing. And I think when you really love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work. And I know that's cliche, and I know there's a million cliches out there around it. But we fell into that category. And so working 7 days a week,
sure, felt like work, but we did love it.
Yeah, well, it didn't feel like the corporate work.
Right.
You're really dreading Monday and
you're
you can't wait for Friday.
And you feel like you're doing everything for somebody else.
Yeah.
Not really part of your own growth.
And I think part of the challenge is beyond money. Of course, that's challenging for many different reasons. We had lost track of our time. We lost track of each other and dating and parenting in the way we wanted to. It was all very passing by. And so when the time came for me to step down from my corporate real estate job, I remember taking time. I went to our condo in Florida and we took several months, and I was in and out of Michigan and Florida, bringing the kids back and forth, really looking to cast a vision for where we were headed, because I knew I was done sacrificing time. I didn't care how much money we were making. And that's where Thrive Realty became a vision. We didn't know we were going to call it Thrive Realty Co. We didn't know we were going to go independent, but the vision of creating a fully serviced space for an agent to plug into and do what a salesperson should do and not what a marketer should do and not what a contract manager should do and not what a boss should do, to simply do the job of a salesperson, which is enough in itself. That's a full role.
Which is all we ever
many
really
different companies.
Nobody got into this industry to be an admin, to be a marketer, to be a contract to close coordinator or anything like that. Nobody gets excited about pushing paper in these transactions. Very rarely do they. And usually if they do, they transition to that side of the business. And so most of us just simply want to help people buy and sell homes. And that became our vision, creating a place where that can exist.
Yep. Yeah. And then the pandemic hit. And we launched Thrive Realty Co. during that time. I remember it was just a moment in time where we were non-essential. We had a lot more time on our hands to think about what we wanted our future to look like, how we could protect our people, our agents, our staff. Everyone was laying everyone off. People were going on unemployment. And you and I were just like, no, F that noise. We're not going to do that.
Well, the direction of the average brokerage out there is just lay low.
Yeah.
It'll all pass. And yet people have mortgages to pay, bills to pay. They're in panic mode, and we need to be able to protect our people through controlling the narrative and also the direction of the company.
Yeah. And we wanted to. I think that was the difference between us and the people we were in business with before, is we truly were like, no, that's not an option for us. We're not going to do that because there is another way, and we're willing to go that way. And so we launched our independent brokerage in 2020, and we haven't looked back since. I have the active role of CEO. So in real estate terms, that can be called team leader. In the business world, it's CEO. And you are the
managing broker. Yep. So the liability and the problems stop with me.
That's right.
Yep.
And you lead the sales force, and you lead an ISA division. And I lead our entire staff. So that's what we do at Thrive, and we love every minute of it. Last year was absolutely the hardest year of our careers, without a doubt.
Definitely.
Yeah. 2023, we love you. We learned so much, but we are so glad you're gone.
Right. Well, and it hasn't always been easy. Like, let's go back and talk about a few of the challenges that we've had, both, people-wise and even with each other. So I think when you and I were just husband, wife, real estate, it was pretty easy, actually, because we had our clearly defined roles. I was out there working with buyers. You primarily handled the listing side and the administrative side in terms of the paperwork, transaction management, all of that, and the marketing. It wasn't until we really started to grow and we brought on our first hire. Hey, Chelsea, if you're watching. So we brought on our first admin long ago. I think that was 2016. And it was after that, and we started bringing agents on, that there started to be a bit of contention with us.
And I think the friction came from when you start to grow a business, which we were not classically trained to do so.
Nope.
Our degree is not in that. And we just were really throwing spaghetti at the walls and kind of following this loosely lit pathway of like, this is how you grow a real estate team. We didn't know who had veto power. We didn't know who should be making the decisions anymore. It was this constant. And I think because truly we didn't know. We were in this almost fear-based decision making. There was no right way. Well, it's almost like raising children. There's no real book on it. And the book we were following wasn't really working for us.
Right. And the challenge is that despite, you're very energetic and boisterous, and I'm a little bit more reserved and quiet in most circumstances. And yet we're still both kind of type A, get it done personalities. We're both going to pick up whatever ball needs to be picked up and run with it. And so we found a lot of times we were both trying to pick up the same ball, and we had different opinions on how that should happen. And no right or wrong, it just caused a lot of points of contention, to the point that it became a sticking point in our relationship. It was something that was actually impacting our relationship completely.
Yeah.
And so we had to sit down and have a conversation with it, and eventually got to the point that we had to agree on what categories of the business each one of us had veto power in. And that is what ultimately changed everything.
Yeah, we had to really define our roles, first of all, like absolute job descriptions on what we handle, each of us individually, and then who had true veto power at the end of the day over certain subjects and matters. And that was game changing. And we did hire a coach to coach us through that moment. We hired a husband-wife coach in the industry and had them kind of lay out like what's possible, how did you get through it, how did this affect you? And we did that for a handful of months, and then really we're off to the races when it came to that. So we have lots of boundaries in place when it comes to that. I think over the years we've actually learned we've worked outside those boundaries a little. Like, for instance, at once upon a time, Justin and I had a particular place in the house where if we came home from work and either one of us had a work discussion, we had to get up physically and go sit in that room to have a business conversation, because it was about training our brain around, hey, if you want to do this here in this space that is not built for that, you're going to interrupt your current pattern and remove yourself from the flow at home to go do so. And it was such a pain in the butt. I remember the first time we did it, we were like, this is so awkward. This is so bizarre. But it really did help us realize, like, wow, what a pattern we had of bringing it home.
You have to create boundaries around it. Because otherwise, our roles within our company as it exists, the hierarchy is you're technically the boss, and I am, I'd say technically, no, and I'm number two. I'm the manager of the company,
I'm not sure
and you are the
technically.
I mean, anyway,
it's pretty clear.
Yeah. Okay. Within our roles as they exist, you're the boss, right? You're the CEO of the company, which is always the top of the pyramid. My role as a managing broker would certainly fall under that. And so based on that hierarchy, it's very hard to not bring that home to where then you can't feel free to be a wife and be a spouse and be a mom. And that was something that we had to learn to overcome, which is why we created the room. If we're going to have a conversation around real estate, it needs to be over there, needs to be intentional, and that's going to shut off. And the moment we walk out of that room, we're back to husband and wife, and I'm taking care of you, and you're my wife at that point.
Yeah, let's talk about the reality of this. I think when it all first started, there was a bit of ego involved. And I know, for instance, like when I first started in the role and we defined it, there was an air of like, I am in charge. I am the boss. You do work for me. And it was this very immature outlook on what we were doing. And it did definitely then affect us at home, because then I brought that home with us. And I was so used to being in the driver's seat, making the big decisions and running fast, that I started doing it at home too. And months and months and months later, our relationship was so deteriorated and so lopsided, and I wasn't happy doing that. I didn't like it. And I remember finally realizing, like, oh my gosh, this is not the persona of Jess at home. Wife Jess, woman Jess, mom Jess. This isn't my alter ego at home. This isn't the role I play here. It doesn't fulfill me to act that way. And it's not conducive to what we're looking to build there. While here, it works really well. It's conducive to what we do here. It's required. It's needed. We've learned that. Cool. We're good to go. And I remember learning in that moment, after doing lots of research, lots of coaching around, most alpha females actually want almost the opposite environment at home. And it's not that we're like this meek 1950s woman, like I'm not allowed to, let me ask permission. It's nothing like that. But there is definitely a desire to say, I don't want the steering wheel. I don't want my foot on the gas pedal. I want a say-so. I'm a valued member of this family, and I certainly make decisions at home. But I want to do that together, and sometimes I don't want to do it at all. You take the wheel. I'm good. So it took us a minute to work through that, too.
Right.
And I think the best way we found through that was really around surrendering, learning that surrendering wasn't weak. It was actually an active choice of strength, of saying, hey, I'm better if I surrender here. We are better off if we surrender to this, whether it was at work or at home.
Yeah, we talk a lot about yin and yang, we even joke that at some point we'll get a tattoo where I have one half, you have the other, and it applies both at work and at home. We find out that at work, there are many things that you're phenomenal at that I'm not that great at, that I, of course, take the back seat on, and then same thing at home. There's things that I'm in control of and I'm great at, so I run with those, and you take the back seat on it. And it actually causes us to create a better bond, a better reliance on each other, I guess is the way I would put it, and strengthens our marriage through that, just that connection.
People ask me all the time what it's like to work together, and I think from the outside in, it looks like we work so closely together. Obviously, we're in the same building a lot of the time. We're in a lot of similar meetings. We work with the same people. So you would think we know everything about each other's work at all times. And that couldn't be more opposite of the truth. There are so many times we get home after a day's work, even if we've driven together, where I'm catching you up on, hey, this is what happened in my workday. Almost the same way a couple in two different industries, two different work environments come home, they break bread, and they're talking about their bosses and their colleagues and their happenings of the day. It's the same for us. We actually are doing the exact same thing because we're not in each other's pocket all day long. We have very defined roles that require independence.
Yeah, there's days where literally we don't see each other at all during the day outside of when we left the house and when we eventually both end up back there. You know, you go left, I go right. And so it's like a traditional working marriage where both spouses go to work. And even when it's not, when we're both here at the office, we're still ships passing in the night the majority of the time. It's me walking by your office and catching a glimpse and throwing you a smile or something, or waving because you're in there on a podcast or in a meeting or anything like that. And or you catching me in between some phone calls or agent communication.
Yeah. I'd say one of the most rewarding pieces of working together and having to navigate the difficulty of that as a husband and wife is the advancement in how we had to learn to communicate with each other. Like, we had to triple down on communication professionally, which then, of course, bled into our personal life of how we are able to communicate so freely and transparently with one another, which I do believe, without a doubt, has been the savior of us being able to preserve our personal relationship. So let's talk about the real stuff, the kind of super after dark stuff about keeping the passion alive. What would you say has been a challenge and then a learned lesson in how we've been able to do that?
I mean, you can't be passion filled without being intentional as shit in a situation like ours.
Such a beautiful sentence.
It is. It's just the reality. You have to be extremely diligent. This is not a passive sport. You know, this is not something that just happens.
What? Our marriage or work?
Both. But we're talking about keeping passion in both arenas. You have to be intentional. You know, when we first met, you have chemistry on your side. You have biology on your side, all the endorphins that kick in and just kind of take you there. As you move beyond that, just like any marriage, it takes a willingness to be persistent and conscious and present, I think, at all times to be able to keep a degree of passion up. And so when it comes to our relationship, there were definitely years in there where it was suffering big time. You know, there was a lot of, whether we were butting heads at work, causing discontentment at home, whether you were bringing your role as CEO home and you found it hard to let that go. And so it created this backwards dynamic in our relationship at home. It took us getting really clear. And honestly, I'd say the one thing that kind of blew the lid off of it that finally made us realize there's another way to do it is the first time we ended up by chance taking what we now refer to as our couples retreats. You know, we ended up getting out of town together, just a very short trip, 2 to 3 nights maximum. And we do nothing but unplug and focus on each other. And the first one, the first day, I don't know if you remember, we spent it kind of contentious. Like we were having some challenging conversations. Yeah,
because I love to work. And I was like, I don't want to be here. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. But that disagreement, and I would say even boiling down into a little bit of an argument, led to one of the strongest physical connections we literally ever had.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said about... Like Justin and I at work if you saw us together, most people on any given day, you would not know we're married. We don't act that way. We really are affectionate at work. And that is just born and bred in me. That is just something from a work standpoint, a training standpoint, like is just how I was raised. Like that's just not a professional environment. And we're almost the opposite in our personal lives. We've gone out with work colleagues and people, and they're like, gosh, Justin's very handsy.
You get a little handsy, but
yes.
I want what I want.
Yes,
you know?
And you are.
Yep.
And so that is a difference that I've learned to ebb and flow with. And I don't think that's easy for a lot of people, to be so stark opposites in one day. That's difficult. That's a learned skill, and something we definitely had to learn to ebb and flow with and be perfectly okay with. Like, this is perfectly unusually ours.
Yeah, I mean, and it takes a degree of trust, I think, too, to know that the other person is not ever trying to put somebody out there in a spotlight that would make them uncomfortable, and vice versa. So, like here at work, there were times in the past where I would want to put my arm around you or give you a hug because I'm your husband, and we would have to say, you know what, actually it's not appropriate, or maybe you would talk to me about it later, and I'd have to learn, you know, and it took a while to learn. I've now learned, and then, you know, same thing when we're out. You learn where boundaries are and where everybody's comfortable, and learn how to function but still remain connected.
Yeah. I read something the other day that said some people in this world need to emotionally connect before having sex, and then some people need sex to emotionally connect. And I thought, that's such a great way to explain it, instead of the age-old, like, women need to emotionally connect before sex, and men don't care. They'll stick it anywhere. And I was reflecting on how working together as much as we do, and for as long as we have, has affected the emotional connection, and having us have to learn how to resurrect that all in one day. Push it down and then resurrect it in one day, because it's just how we live our lives. And that is a challenge. That's not something that I would say we've mastered. It's just simply a challenge, and it's why we have these, at minimum, quarterly couples retreats. We've picked up the frequency rate on that in the last couple of years because of the recognition that we're working a little harder and a little extra. And so that means we have to put that amount of time into our personal lives too, and our love life.
Yeah. I mean,
and it does help.
If you spend all week long going from red light to green light, eventually it's going to get stuck on yellow. And that kind of is what happens. And that we found the rhythm with that is roughly quarterly. And so quarterly we head out to our couples retreat, and we're able to reconnect and focus on each other, and it just keeps everything going in between.
I would almost reckon we fall back in love.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would say
you've always said
that is what we do.
You believe people fall in and out of love, whereas I believe, like, yes, I do believe that, but at no point do I not love you. I view it as people fall in and out of lust. You know, there's like this passionate lust that exists where you have butterflies when you see them, and, you know, you're thinking about them constantly when they're not there. I think those things are, and maybe we're literally talking about the same thing and just calling it two different things.
Yeah, I think when I say people fall in and out of love, it's not that there's lack of care during the out of love. I'm talking about that euphoric recognition of, like, oh, this person is really special to me. And I think you can feel that with a lot of different people for different reasons. There's platonic love, there's romantic love, there's lust love. And I think it happens with everyone all the time. Think about, you know, anybody listening, the times in which you are madly in love with your best friend, because you can't spend enough time with that person. You just love them to death. You would do anything for them. And it's solely platonic. There's no romance. There's no sexual activity or anything. It's not sensual in any way. And then there's, you know, an actual relationship love where I think it can happen the same way, where you fall in love and you're mad about that person. And then, you know, we're human. Life happens, work happens, schedules happen, routines happen, and you're in a rhythm of, like, yeah, of course I love you. Yes, I'm 100%. We're together. We're married. But am I madly in love with you in this moment? Maybe not. No, not in this moment, of course. I'm madly in love with you right in this second. But in other moments, I would absolutely admit, like, no, we're not in love right now. But I've certainly experienced it multiple times with you in our relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, if anybody has any questions about what we just talked about or wants to go deeper into any subject, happy to do it. Just reach out to us, comment below, send us a DM. We're here for you.